Okay, so given the role, you're all in the right place, which is good. We'll see if we get the stragglers at some point to show up. So this is Digital Tools for Architects. It used to be called Digital Tools for Architects 2. Now 135 is called Digital Tools for Designers, and this is called Digital Tools for Architects or something like that. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Right? You're here in the right place. This is basically translated to Rhino and V-Ray, which is awesome. So my name, a little bit of information about me. My name is Grant Adams. I'm an associate professor of architecture here. A lot of you, this is like total repeat, but hey, whatever. You get me twice, so you get me repeating twice. I am here on Mondays and Wednesdays virtually all day, but I'm not here on Tuesdays, Thursdays, or Fridays. So by associate professor, that basically means I'm part-time, even though this semester I'm teaching full-time load. So it is what it is, but don't expect to see me here on the other days of the week. If you need me, by all means, email me. I try to be available as much as I can. gadams@dvc.edu is my school email. If you email that, it gets forwarded to my grant@digitaltoolforarchitects.com email. gadams@dvc is shorter, so it's easier to type, but it doesn't matter. You might get a response from me from the other email. It doesn't matter. All right. I also give you my phone number so you can text me. If you're not going to be in class or you're going to be late or something like that, please text me and let me know. That way I'm not waiting around for you to get here, and I know who's going to be here, who's not going to be here, etc. My office hours are right after this class from 2 to 3. I'll also have another half hour from 5:30 to 6 before my last class of the night from 6 to 9. So if you need me, I'll be here. I tend to get here at 6 in the morning, so if you really need me before 8, I can be around before 8. So the point is I'm around a lot, and you're, of course, welcome to talk to me, but my official paid time is from 2 to 3. So you can get me there. I have 2 degrees. I have a Bachelor's of Arts in Architecture from UC Berkeley, which is the undergraduate architecture degree from Berkeley. I also have a Master of Architecture degree from Berkeley. Rare to have them both from Berkeley, but that was my track. So I have plenty of experience in this realm. I was actually originally hired to teach the first class, the Digital Tools for Architects 1, or the Digital Tools for Designers now class, in 2007, the fall of 2007. That was right after grad school. I taught a similar class when I was in grad school and found my way into this. Along the way, I convinced Daniel that this class was relevant and important, kind of before Rhino and V-Ray really existed. Rhino existed, but it was, I think, Rhino version 2, and we're on Rhino 5 now. So it was kind of early in the scheme of things, but I was like, no, we really have to teach this class. And so it was originally offered as like a 150 option class taught on grant funding or whatever, and it's snowballed into its own kind of subsequent class. To me, this is one of the more critical things for you to learn as you move into the upper level studios. So when you start thinking about 220 and 221, this is a very critical thing. I've had students who've come in here and taken, I got to change my screensaver settings because it's going to keep doing this all day. I've had students who have taken this class who have not even been in architecture and succeeded just fine. There is no prerequisite for the class. All you have to do is come with the desire to learn what we're going to be doing. So that's about me. The website for this class is digitaltoolsforarchitects.com. If you've been in 135 before, your username and password are still the same as they were before. If you forgot it, you can reset it. But this is essentially the same website you used for that class. I do the same website because a lot of the stuff crosses over. And so maybe you're not dealing specifically with Photoshop right now, but you want to go back and review how something worked, or I reference something. It's all available there. I will post all of the exercises, all of the assignments. So today in lab, you'll get exercise 201, your first exercise. I'll show you guys this afterward, but I'll give you the paper handout, but there will also be the online version. Today, you'll actually download a template from online to make sure that you actually have been able to register and log in and all that sort of thing. The assignments will be posted there. The course syllabus is posted there. The course calendar is posted there. Basically, everything's on that site. Furthermore, when you do your exercises and your assignments, you will post your work onto the course website as well. And so that's how you effectively turn in your work. Be advised that this is not the D2L, Desire to Learn, or any of the course offering websites that you're used to. This is its own independent website. And I do this because we would, with the amount of work we create, we would completely swamp their system. So it's just not going to work. So we do it on our own. I have all the tutorials. I have videos of a lot of the tutorials. I have lectures that I've done for years that are backlogged in there. So if you need anything, it should be there. That's the idea. You will also use this website to comment on other students' work. And so if you were in 135 before, you got used to the commenting system. It will be the same commenting system that you did. It doesn't take as many comments in this class as it does in 135. The numbers will be less because in the beginning in this class, we will do a lot of the same thing. We'll all make the same shape. We'll all do the same clamp. Because you have to learn certain skills for how to model in Rhino, it doesn't make sense to have you all comment on exactly the same thing. Oh, you did a really nice job on the clamp. I mean, you know, it's irrelevant. So there will be fewer opportunities or places where you need to comment. So you end up with about 2/3 of the comments you would in 135. So food for thought. So I am going to intersperse some little 3D models with this just to get your eyes and ears going a little bit here. You're all here, so that's good. The course schedule is 11 to 11:50. You're going to listen to me talk for a while. And then from 12 to 1:50 is lab. So you notice that this class is conveniently spanning the critical lunch period, right? So we go technically from 11 to 2. I'm not going to make you starve. If you want to eat, go eat, right? If you've been in 135 with me before, you know that I do not run a particularly tight ship. I don't believe that that's necessary. This is a college class. We'll get into that later. But if you need to step out, you need to have a little food, by all means, go do it. Right? I'd prefer that you not do it while I'm talking. Right? Do it during the lab portion. But stuff happens. You need to deal with that kind of stuff. Do it. So I also don't lecture strictly from 11 to 11:50. Right? Sometimes it'll be 10 minutes of lecture. Sometimes it'll be an hour and a half of lecture. It depends on what we're trying to do. When we get further along in the semester and we're doing kind of advanced renderings, it may be that I lecture for 20 minutes, then you work for an hour, and then I lecture for another 20 minutes, and then we work for an hour because we need time to render. So stuff varies a little bit. So yeah. That's why there isn't some break in the middle where you'd say everybody take lunch now if you want to get it. Exactly. I don't tend to do it. I try to have a break between lecture and lab. So whenever I finish, we tend to take a break. Sometimes, like if the lecture is quick and then we go into lab, and it's a little bit, sometimes it's more of a formal lecture, sometimes it's demonstration. It varies. You will sense when the right time is to go eat. But I try to build that in, and I try to anticipate that people are going to do that. And hey, it's the cost of having a class that spans the lunch hour. Furthermore, some of you are in 8 a.m. class this morning, followed by this class, followed by 2:20 or something afterward, or 2:21. So you have a really full day. You need breaks, and that's to be expected. Okay. You can read this later. Okay, so let's talk about the software that we're going to be learning in this class. Rhinoceros is the 3D modeling software that we're going to spend a lot of time in. How many people have opened Rhino before? A little bit. Okay, that's good. That's better than I've expected in the past. So Rhino is a very advanced 3D modeling program. It's a mathematical 3D modeling program. It's not a solids modeling program. So we're going to deal with points, lines, curves, and connections of curves to define surfaces. It's, I think, relatively easy once you start. It's a very daunting program the first day. So what you guys will do today will take you all day. What you do, if I asked you at the end of the semester to do what you do today, it would take you about less than a minute, maybe, right? So this is expected that it's going to be a little bit of a struggle in the beginning. There's a lot of commands to learn. How many people have worked in AutoCAD before? Okay, if you've worked in AutoCAD before, Rhino will be fairly easy. It's very, very similar. There's a few weird differences, like in AutoCAD, erases something, delete in Rhino deletes it, so the command lines are slightly different. But for the most part, it works the same way. So if you're used to seeing AutoCAD, you're used to a command line, Rhino will be pretty natural for you. The best way of describing Rhino, I think, is it's exactly what AutoCAD should be in 3D. Right? AutoCAD in 3D is horrible. Rhino is what it should be. And so you guys will see that as you go along. We'll spend the first month or so really learning Rhino and trying to get through certain techniques for how to model. We won't spend too much time in V-Ray, though of course I have to give you a little V-Ray along the way because we need the visual reward of something looking pretty in the process. So we'll do a little bit of V-Ray. As we go to the end of the semester, we'll do a lot more V-Ray and a lot less Rhino. So it'll skew as we go across the nature of the semester. V-Ray, which I haven't talked about explicitly yet, we are going to be using V-Ray 2.0 on these computers. That's what the lab has. The current version of V-Ray, I think, is all the way to 4.0 now because they released 3.0 and it was horrible, so they quickly released 4.0. We haven't updated yet. Some of the stuff has changed. Kind of depends on how it works out. V-Ray tends to not be the kind of thing that you will want to install on your computer at home. It tends to be rather difficult to get licensing for and to have it work. Furthermore, we have a setup here where we'll do network rendering, which means we'll harness all 90 of the computers in the lab to do renderings, which will dramatically cut down the time that it takes to do a rendering. If you were doing it, say, on your home computer, it might take you 24, 36 hours to do a rendering. Here, it might take you an hour. So there's a big difference in time, and so we'll talk through the strategies for how that works. Come on. And like it won't like wake up. I don't know. I got to figure it out. Okay, so let's go back. There is a required textbook for the class. If you've already been in my class before, it's the same. So you don't have to buy it twice. I'm not that evil, right? Furthermore, if you Google for coupon codes, by all means, get a discount. Doesn't help me at all. It's the publisher, okay? So if you Google for Lulu coupon codes, I think some people found some codes this morning where maybe if multiple people got together to buy it, they could get a discount or whatever. The current book edition is version 4.0. If you have an older version, it's fine. Some things like in V-Ray specifically, they change exactly what the little button looks like. So you'll just have to think of the new button instead of the old button. But it's essentially the same thing. We're talking about the same thing. Any updates are available on the website, so you can look at the updated versions there as you go forward. So it's lulu.com/spotlight/DTFA to get it. And again, if you buy it for this class and you haven't taken 135, it'll be the same for both. Okay, and it's not $250, right? So grading for this class. There is no midterm and no final exam for this class. Your grade is going to be based on 4 things. Your lab exercises are worth 20%. I will talk about each of these individually and explain what they are in a second. Your assignments are worth 40% collectively. There tend to be 4 assignments for this class, which means they'll each be worth 10%. Depends on how you want to do the math. Your final project is worth 30%, so it's not something to just pretend doesn't exist and slam it at the end. It's something we're going to be working a lot on for the last maybe April and May. We'll be working on it in class, doing it over and over and making it better. So the end results are really, really, really good. I have some bound books that I can show you of what previous semesters have done. So when we get closer, you'll see that. And then we have 10% as a participation grade. Obviously, you have to be here to get participation. If you're not showing up, you're not going to get the participation. It's also part of the comments make up this 10%. And so I'll talk a little bit more in depth about that. Oh, one other thing about this class is I try very hard to make this a very consistent workload class. So like if you're in 121 or you're in 220, you have like a huge amount of work and then it's like, oh my God, I'm going to die amount of work, right? There's nothing below I have a huge amount of work. You know, it starts there. I try to make sure that this is like as consistent as possible. You're always kind of working on stuff. You always have an assignment that's 4 weeks out, 3 weeks out that you're kind of working on as you go through the semester so that you can take those other classes while you're taking this class. It's meant to enhance those classes, not meant to make you panic. Right? So we try to be nice and even. You do a lot of work in class, and that's the idea. If you were in 135, you have a good sense of what my trajectory of 135 is like. So lab exercises are worth 20% of your overall grade. The exercises are designed to be completed during the lab portion of this class. So you shouldn't have to do a lab exercise for homework. Sometimes when we get to rendering, you might have to let it render for a while after class and then come back and post it. It's not the end of the world to do that. It's not really taking up your time. You just need a little bit of extra rendering time. If you didn't quite finish a lab exercise, post what you have, right? I think especially in this class, towards the end, people get really wrapped up in their design for their final project, and they forget to post something at the end. Like maybe you were working on something and you didn't quite get to the interior perspective that I was talking about, but you were working on it and you got a nice exterior perspective. At least post that, right? So especially towards the end, make sure that there is always a post for your exercise, and you'll get credit for it because you need to be here, you need to be working. On the other hand, if you kind of bail on the class at about noon after I finish talking and you don't really hang around for it, and then you stop posting your stuff, chances are I'm not going to be too lenient when it comes to turning in your work late, right? But if you're here and you're working and you're posting different stuff, but you're still posting, I'm happy, right? That's a lot of it, especially towards the end of the semester. In the beginning of the semester, it'll be so boilerplate. We're working on this, you work on this, you finish it, you post it, life is good, right? But towards the end, it's a little bit more up in the air because everybody's working on different things as they learn. So they should be done prior to the end of class today, right? I tend not to grade it immediately after, so if if it's a little bit late, it's not the end of the world, okay? Assignments, on the other hand, I'm very strict about when they're late. So you have to make sure they get turned in on time. So assignments are larger. They tend to require some work outside of class, whether that's modeling or whether that's cutting some stuff out on the laser cutter and gluing it together. Those projects tend to take time outside of class, and you'll have to budget in a little bit of time for that. Collectively, they're worth 40% of your overall grade. So like I said, about 10% for each assignment. There's only 4. 135 has like 7, so it's fewer assignments, a little bit more work on each assignment. They're graded both on your skills used and your overall design. So just because you used all the things I was talking about, if you have really ugly stuff, it's not so good, right? But things like you want the texture mapping to work nicely. You want the environments to work nicely. There will be certain requirements, and it'll be fairly obvious what I'm trying to have you hit for a particular assignment, okay? So just like in my 135 classes, and I apologize for continuing to say that over and over, but there's enough of you that took my 135 classes to where I feel like I can say that and make you understand what I'm talking about. You will be allowed to do 1 regrade per assignment, right? It's due at the end of the semester, so you can do it at any point and submit it, but I won't grade it until the very end. What this means, if I were to translate it, is let's say we do assignment 201, and you turn in, it's going to be a table and a chair. You turn in your table and a chair, you didn't really do very well, you turned it in on time, let's start with that, and maybe you got a B on it, you got an 80% on it, and you're like, I really wanted an A, I wanted to do better on this. You can go back and redo your work, remodel it, and whatever. You'll submit it as a resubmit, brand new post, and at the very end of the semester, after everything's turned in, I'll go back and I'll look at it as if I never saw your first table and chair. It's a brand new, fresh start. Okay? That being said, your grade can go up and it can go down. So it's not a grade based on improvement, it's just a brand new, fresh start at it. Okay? You can do this once for each assignment. So 201, 202, 203, and 204. Right? Generally, people don't do it for all of them. Right? Generally, you've really flubbed one of them and you fix that one. Right? I'm not out here to penalize you. I want you to do well. Generally, by the time you get to this class, by the time you get to the end of this class, everybody does very well. That's the idea. Okay? So they're worth 40% of your overall grade, and you can do a regrade if you want to. Okay? Course participation. So after a lot of the exercises in this class, and definitely after the assignments, you're going to need to comment constructively on 3 of your fellow students' work. Okay? And like I said, I will be very specific in this class. You don't have to comment on it. You do have to comment on it because we have some stuff that isn't worth commenting on. When I talk about comments, and I will walk you through when we make our first comments, I'll walk you through how to do it. It'll be very clean and obvious. Okay? When I talk about making comments, I do not want you to say, oh, that rendering is so pretty. Right? That is not a constructive, good comment. Right? You want to talk about, I think you have a great image here, but your HDRI background sun doesn't match up with your physical sun in the scene, therefore the shadows are unrealistic. That's a constructive comment. Right? That's what we want, not, it's really pretty. I like what you did with your work. Right? Those aren't helpful. Nobody wants to hear those. Okay? So we're going to try to make sure they're very constructive. The truth is that it's a whole lot better for you to learn how to articulate what is good in something and what is bad in something, because it will teach you an awful lot about your own work. So it is designed to help you as well. Okay? So it's part of your 10% participation grade for this class, so you do get graded on it. And as I give you grade sheets, you'll see where you stand in comments. In the beginning, it will seem like the comments affect your grade dramatically because there's just not very much out there. But toward the end, they're only 5% or whatever. So materials for this class. As I said, you have to get the handbook, but you also need a flash drive or a hard drive to work on in this class. I used to be specific to flash drives. Now stuff is getting bigger and bigger in size, so sometimes external hard drives are a better way to go. It has to be at least a 32 gig drive, because I promise you, you will fill that up. Right? You might need more than that, but the bare minimum would be a 32 gig drive. You're going to have all of your Rhino files, which can get rather large, but you'll also have a pretty big material library that you'll want to have on there. And so when you couple all of that together, you just need space. And buy it now. I've had people who do the double flash drive thing, and it just gets complicated. So just buy one. The other thing, it doesn't matter in 135, but it does matter in 136. Get used to trying to sit in the same seat and put your flash drive in the same port on the computer. When we get into rendering, it just helps to have it that way, so just get used to that. And so if you really hate your seat today, get here early next class and claim your seat, right? But just try to be consistent, because it will help when we start to do renderings, because it's looking for referenced files. And you can fix it if you have a different computer or it's a different drive. There's ways to get around it just easier if you get used to it now. You also need to make sure that you back up and safeguard your work. Some people use Google Drive, some people use Dropbox. You have your choice of how you want to back it up. Some people copy it to their home computer. 135, you guys know I hammered you about backing up stuff. So same thing applies here. If you come to me halfway through the semester and you left your flash drive in your pocket and it went through the wash and it's dead, I will say, it's not my problem. You should have backed up your work. If you were driving your car and you were trying to get your keys out of your pocket, well, maybe not your keys, your cell phone, and your flash drive got stuck to your cell phone and you pulled your cell phone out and your flash drive flew out the window. I'm trying to invent something entertaining. You're supposed to laugh, but whatever. It's not my problem, right? If you sat down in one of these chairs and broke your flash drive off in the computer, which has happened, I will say it's not my problem, right? So you get the idea. I don't want you coming to me and whining about you lost your flash drive or whatever. It's your job. You're college students. You can keep track of your flash drive, right? If you have a lot of trouble, attach it to your keys. It's going to be really hard to leave without your flash drive, right? So figure it out, whatever works for you, right? Flash drives are shockingly durable. I've had mine go through the wash several times. You know, they work, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes they die halfway through and you try to copy them off. It happens. So back up your work. You will, for assignment 202, need to have some physical modeling, some glue and like a X-Acto knife or something like that. When we get to that, I'll talk about what you need. We'll demonstrate it. It won't be too hard to deal with. Everything's available at the bookstore, but if you have it from another class, you can use it from another class. It's a pretty picture, isn't it? Yeah, come on. I can't handle this. It's like ridiculous. I will figure it out. Right? Let me make sure I didn't skip anything. Okay. So if you're going to miss 2 weeks or more of class, probably not a good idea to take the class because you're going to lose out on an awful lot of what I'm talking about. In a class like this, it's kind of important that you're here listening to what I'm talking about because it's really easy to miss stuff. So try not to be absent from class. If you are going to be absent, please text me, send me an email ahead of time. Just say, hey, I'm not going to be around. That way I'm not sitting here waiting for you to get here because I would rather wait for you to get here than to start and repeat myself. So I try to make sure that everybody's here. If you don't complete 3 of the assignments, this is boilerplate, but if you don't complete 3 of the assignments, that's 3 out of 4 that you didn't complete. You're probably going to fail the class. I mean, it's kind of obvious, right? So you may receive an F. Due dates are announced in class. Assignments that are not turned in on the due date, which is always before class starts. Right? So yours will be due before 11 or before I start talking at 11:05 or whatever. If it's not turned in and posted and the physical copy, if necessary, is given to me, it's marked late. And we'll talk about the late work policy as we go forward. Best thing is just not to have late work. Just don't turn something in. Always better, right? And so the exercises are due at the end of lab. Sometimes you need a little bit more time. I'll be very flexible on the exercise. You just want to make sure that they're posted. So in a class like this, there's 30 of you. There's one of me. It will be hard for me to get to absolutely everybody to do one-on-one help, right? If you've been in my classes before, you know I try very, very hard to sit with every one of you and help you through anything that you're struggling with. But I can't always get to everybody right away. And so if you're stuck, lean over to somebody next to you, say, hey, Tyler, how do I do this, right? And he might go, I don't know, right? But that's okay. At least you tried, right? Don't be a stranger to the person next to you. Ask them. They might know how to do it, and it might be good. Right? And you don't have to sit there doing this for an hour, right? This gets really old, okay? So I will try very hard. I also try to get to people in the order that they are, I try to pay attention to when hands go up, and I try to get to people. So it doesn't always work that I do, but I try hard, okay? So that's something to be aware of. I strongly suggest you bring this handbook and take notes in it because there'll be little changes. Like I said, especially if you have one of the older books, there might be some changes. It's called a bitmap texture instead of a text bit, or there's those kinds of things that need adjustment, and you can just write the little notes in. And everything is done under a Creative Commons share-alike license for the class. It's just the easiest way. If you have issues with licensing and rights and copyrights and whatever, we can talk about it during office hours. I did have a student who had serious issues with this, so I like to bring it up in case you do for some reason. But in this world of academia, you really don't have any rights, and chances are if you did anything spectacular, DVC would take the rights to it anyway. So go figure, right? Okay. So late work policy. Assignments are graded down by 10% each day that they're late. So if we had an assignment due today and you didn't turn it in prior to 11 or whenever I started talking on that day, it would be marked down by 10%. So if you had an A, you just got a B, right? Assuming that you turned it in prior to the start of next class. So you would have to turn it in before Wednesday. If you didn't turn it in on Wednesday and you turned it in before the class the following Monday, right, you'd be dropped 20%. This is pretty obvious, right? So it's 10% per day it's late. Once you get to 4 days late, I'll give you a maximum of, you just can have 50% if you turn it in, okay? And that's 50% is a whole lot better than a 0, right? So I try to be nice, believe it or not. So one other thing that I want to emphasize, and those of you that have been in my classes before know this is how I feel about it. This is very much a college class, right? You should want to be here. I want you to want to be here, right? I'm interested in what I'm teaching. I hope you're interested in what I'm teaching too, right? That being said, you guys are in charge of your own destiny, right? If you decide to vanish into the ether halfway through the semester, which 5 of you probably will. I don't know which 5 yet. If you vanish, take yourself out of the class. Don't hope that somebody else does, right? All too often, I think, philosophically, here at DVC, faculty are way too hand-holding about making sure that you, you haven't been here and you need to drop the class and all that kind of stuff. Look, I'll be honest, I'd rather give you an F, right? I don't believe in that. I believe that you should take yourself out of the class if you can't do it, right? This is college. This is what it is. I can promise you, when you move on to Berkeley and you're in a class with 500 people in a lecture hall, they don't care, right? They're not going to go through and hold your hand. So just get used to it. It's not a big deal. I want you to be here. I hope that you guys want to be here. And as long as you want to be here and you're here, life is great and you should get a great grade, right? That's the way I look at it. And so I try to teach the class that way. I try to make sure that you're excited to be here and to do stuff like this. Right? That's the idea. So these are some physical examples of models that people have made based in Rhino. But I like to show some student work in the very beginning because I like to kind of show you the direction that you'll be going. Now, of course, it's going to take a while for you guys to get to this level and to be doing these kinds of renderings. Some of these are on the older side, so they're not as good, or the renderings aren't as good because we didn't have the network rendering set up. But we're going to talk a lot about how do you make interior scenes that work? How do you cast light through a building? What happens when it reflects off the floor? How do we add lighting in? One of the things that people love more than anything else is figuring out how to do a night rendering. right? It's probably the sexiest rendering you can possibly do as part of a presentation. It's also the hardest to do, right, and to pull off. And we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about how do you build these lights in and how do you make this killer rendering. And so we're going to talk a lot about that kind of stuff. Some of these have Photoshop and whatever put in to enhance them a bit. And I can pick on little things that don't work and do work, and where's the shadow against the ground and that sort of thing. But the point is, you're going to have a lot of flexibility in what you create, and we're going to talk about how do you apply the textures, how do you get the lighting to look the way it does, how does it cast the shadows, right? One of the really neat things about V-Ray is it's considered to be one of the accurate photorealistic renderers. So we can actually calculate how light enters a building, and we can calculate how many times it bounces. And so if we're sitting in this room right now, we have ambient light coming in from here, right? We have light coming off computer screens. We have light coming off projectors, right? And so the light from outside is bouncing on this desk and reflecting up on me, right? The monitor is reflecting light up on me, right? Furthermore, I'm probably reflecting some light back to you. So V-Ray will do up to 8, maybe 16 bounces, depending on the settings that we have created. So you can see how that creates a very realistic view of a particular scene. So it's a very accurate, very realistic view. That's why it takes a while to do it. And so we're going to talk about how do you actually create that? How do you create the scene that gives you this kind of environment? Right? We'll talk about backgrounds and how backgrounds work and that sort of thing. Some people are more skilled in Photoshop than others, and they tend to push the boundaries a bit. There are other views like this that are done entirely in V-Ray, right? With no Photoshop, no extra work in the background. And so I know some of these are dark, but you can look at them online later on and get a better sense. Sometimes settings are a little off, like that floor looks wet. Probably wasn't intended to be quite that shiny. Yeah, so we'll work through those kinds of changes and tweaks as we go forward to really enhance these. We'll deal with lighting specifically. We'll design light fixtures and how those work together. We'll deal with furniture. Obviously, I told you the first assignment is going to be a table and a chair. Could be a desk and a chair. And so you'll work through that. Some of the stuff is designed for you to be able to reuse. So you might like your table and chair enough to be able to put it in your final project, right? That was part of the intent as you go forward. Likewise, light fixtures. So we try to build everything upon itself. Right? A lot of times people like to use, so like in this one, the painting in the background is their image from before that they did as a rendering for one of their assignments. So we do those kinds of things. I was particularly fond of this one. The out of the airplane view I thought was really nice. We'll talk about cameras and how certain cameras are set up and angles, wide angle, narrow angle, etc. We'll talk about general atmosphere. What does it feel like to be in a particular scene? A lot of times that has to be done in Photoshop afterward. That one is too bad that it's completely dark and you can't see it because it's really cool. More examples. Right. We'll talk about non-rectilinear objects like cloth and how do you make cloth and drapes and those kinds of things, pillows, right? Those are things that would be very challenging to make in SketchUp. So we'll talk about how to do that kind of stuff, which is really fun. And so we'll end with that one, the kind of the snow overlay. So it's a really fun class. I think you guys will really enjoy it. I tend to have people who really, really like Rhino after it's done. And so I will invite your critique after the class is over and see what you think of it. So we're going to take a quick break, maybe 5-10 minutes. So yeah, let's take 10 minutes. We'll be back at 11:55. Today will not go the whole time, so I'm not worried about you guys having enough time for lunch. We'll start in maybe 10 minutes. Actually, you know what? Let's start in 15 minutes. So if anybody's really starving, they can deal with it. We'll start at noon. And we're going to go through exercise 201, which will involve registering for the website, but then we're actually going to make something in Rhino for the first time, which will seem very, very daunting, I promise you. But like I said, it will take you an hour today. It would take you less than a minute at the end of the semester. Right? Sometimes I wonder whether I should give this to people on the last day and time them and see how long it would take, because it's really easy. So anyway, 15 minutes. We'll see you when you come back. Okay, so we're going to pick back up, and I'm going to walk you through the website a bit. We're going to walk through the registration, so all of you that already have an account can like put your heads down and sleep for a while, because it's going to be just more of this. The good news is there's so many of you that already have accounts that I don't think we're actually going to crash the website. So it could actually work out in everybody's best interest. So the the website is digitaltoolsforarchitects.com, and you'll end up with this website when you get there. If you haven't logged in, you won't see this black bar across the top of the page yet, which a lot of you won't see at the moment. And what I'm going to have you do, well, we'll go to that in a second. Let me walk you through the website a little bit just so you know what's available at your fingertips. So right here, we have our basic menu structure that covers a lot of what the class has to offer. Under the About page, we have things like the course syllabus and the calendar. Again, you guys are going to be looking for Digital Tools for Architects 2 or Archi 136. I haven't updated it to say Digital Tools for Architects or Digital Tools for Designers. Just look for Archi 136. That's you guys. Next over, we have lectures. So again, if we go to 136, Spring 2016 would be these lectures. For this class, it's less likely. I have these open in tabs so I don't have to wait for the website to load. You will have a reverse chronological list. So today's lecture is 201. If I go to lecture 201, it will present us with links to the recordings. Obviously, I don't have the recording that I just did because I haven't processed it yet, so it won't be there quite yet. But I also have course introductions or the same lecture from previous semesters. So if you really needed something from a particular lecture, you can go back and look at one from a couple years ago, and chances are it's similar. Also, if there are any slides or keynote presentations or any of that kind of stuff, it'll be available there. You can download the PDFs of that as well. So that's all under lectures. And again, you're looking for 136, Spring 2016. The tutorial section has links to all the tutorials. So you're going to primarily in this class be dealing with Rhino, which has a ridiculous number of tutorials, and also V-Ray, which again has a bunch of tutorials. And some of these have little videos that accompany them that will walk you through certain steps. Some of them don't. But again, they're very much step-by-step instructions for things that you might be doing. Today we're going to be looking at this Rhino 5.2 Simple Shapes, which you'll want to load up. If you haven't registered for the class yet, some of the stuff will be blocked out. You won't see some of the images, or some, and it'll have a little banner that says you need to log in to see everything. So we're going to get you all logged in just a little bit. But this is the one that we'll be following through with today. And you see that I try to show the various tools that I'm going to use and really script it as much as possible so that you can really understand and see the techniques that I'm showing you in lecture. So as we move forward, we can come over here to exercises. We'll go again to Digital Tools for Architects 2, 136. And you can see the Spring 2016 semester, which I did. And then I went ahead and clicked on exercise 201 out of that list. And so this is the handout that I gave you all. Oh, I don't have a copy. You guys have the copies right now. That's the handout that I gave you all, except it's in digital form, which means that the links are live. So as you're going through, if you need something specifically, the links are actually working. A little bit later on, when we get to part 2, we're actually going to download this 3DM file. It's my way of confirming that you all were able to register and log in. So I'm going to leave that open in a tab as we move forward. Okay, so when we get to the login, if you look up here, the last item is login. Before I do that, I should point out a couple other things. Resources, we'll get to these, but you'll be working kind of extensively with the V-Ray material library and the Rhino blocks library. As we go forward in the class. There's a lot of things that are available there for you that we'll talk about. Student work, if you want to look at previous semester's student work or this semester's student work after it's been posted, it's listed under student work, Digital Tools for Architects 2, and then you can go into the individual assignments or the final project and see work from the final project, for example. So anyway, if we click on the login button here on the right, this is the sample work from the final from last semester. So if we click on the login button, you'll get a page that looks like this. Now you guys don't currently have a username and a password yet, so you're going to click on this link at the bottom that says register. okay, which will then bring this page up that will be register for the site. I'm going to ask that you pick a username that's somewhat related to your actual name, so like your first name, period, last name, or first initial, last name, or something along those lines, because believe it or not, I can't tell which, one sexy hot mama 123 you are. Okay, so I want just some basic understanding of who you are, right? I have to grade, I have to find you, it makes my life a lot easier. Okay, so under email, you'll type in your email address. It could be your Gmail or whatever. It doesn't have to be your school email. A lot of you don't use your school email anyway, so perhaps use your own. That would be nice. And then under invitation code, you're going to use this DTFA student, all capitals, right? And once you do that and click the register button, it will send you an email with the temporary password. Okay? The temporary password will come into your account. It might go to the spam folder, which is not unheard of, especially in Gmail. It has a tendency to drop itself into a spam folder. You're looking for an email that's coming from WordPress, and that will then give you a temporary password. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to walk around and make sure that everybody gets registered, okay, and logged in and all the rest of it, and then we'll pick it up again and we'll do the Rhino part for part 2. Okay? So if you've already registered, bear with me for a little bit. Check Facebook or whatever. Okay, so we're going to start back up again. I think I got everybody registered. A lot of you are jumping ahead on me, which is fine. Part of Rhino is figuring out how to model on your own. One of the things that you'll learn a lot in Rhino is that I might have a certain way of teaching you how to model something, but you could model it 6 other ways. So there really isn't a right or a wrong way. What I try to do for the first month when I give you scripted exercises of this is what we're going to model is I'm trying to hit on certain key commands that I think are relevant. And so if there's another way of doing it and you feel comfortable doing it another way, you can do it another way. The end result will be the same. It's just I'm trying to get you certain things that I know in 2 months you're going to want to know how to do that. So I'm trying to give you those things in advance. Okay? So I've gone ahead and I've pulled up exercise 201, which I go to exercises, I go to 136, and I go to the spring 2016 list. And then from that list, I pick exercise 201. It's the only one there right now, but ultimately we'll have a lot more. And we've already done part 1, so I can scroll through part 1, and we're going to look at part 2. And essentially what we're going to be modeling is this shape at the end. And so I'm going to go ahead before I start and download this exercise. Oh, it should say 201, Fall 2015 3DM. Okay? Doesn't matter that it's old. It's the file that matters. So I'm going to right-click on the file, and I'm going to click on Save Link As. And when I do that, it's going to let me save as type Rhino 3D model, which is what it is. And I'm just going to save it onto the desktop for right now. If you have your flash drive and you want to save it on a flash drive, that's fine. For what we're doing today, it doesn't matter. You don't need to save this. We're not going to ever use it again. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and save it onto the desktop. I'll click Save. And once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and find it on my desktop, maybe. Which, of course, it's always somewhere. There it is, right here. And I'll double-click on it to open. If you open Rhino first and then say File Open, it's essentially the same thing.
What? Wait a minute. What happened? What? I'm getting a bunch of... Oh, this is a demo?
Take a look. No, that's fine.
Oh.
Go back. Did you right-click on this and save this to your desktop?
It's
okay.
right here.
Okay, go to the Start menu. Oh wait, okay, it's opening. Just give it a little time. Just hit OK. Or close it. That's a software that's running on top of Rhino. It's not supposed to open by default. All right, so I now have this file open in Rhino. And I want to take a little bit of time and walk you through what Rhino is and what does it look like. Because when you first open it, it can be a little daunting about what's really happening on screen. So before we get into actually building the shape, I think it's important that we talk through it. So In Rhino, I have lots of ways of accessing particular commands. At the top here, I have my normal set of menu items that you're used to, like in Word, right? You can go to the menu items. All the commands in Rhino are available through the menu structure, though those tend to be fairly slow at actually navigating and getting there. But for example, if I wanted to draw a rectangle, I could go to Curve and then pick Rectangle, corner to corner, right? For example. Instead of that, I can also use, there's a bunch of just easy to pick buttons in the standard toolbar here that would allow me to, for example, pick a rectangle corner to corner. So that's just a matter of clicking on it. So to a lot of people, that's faster. Okay? The other thing that's available in Rhino is up here at the very top. And those of you that are AutoCAD people, you might be used to it being at the bottom. AutoCAD and Rhino are different in that respect. You can customize it, though I use the default settings here. Is something called the command line. And the command line allows you to type in a command or start to type a command instead of picking a particular button. So if I wanted, say, a rectangle corner to corner, I could start typing rectangle, if I can spell, right? And you see that it very quickly jumps to rectangle because it knows that's what I want. Okay? So the command line is ultimately the fastest way of interacting with Rhino. But it also is the most sophisticated. It takes the most time to get used to. And there's a certain number of commands you kind of have to memorize and whatever. When I lecture in Rhino, I will jump between using all three different methods. And a lot of times I'll show you all three different methods so that you get used to what the button looks like, what the command would be, and then what the menu structure would be. When we look at the tutorials themselves, I don't know if this one, let me open up Simple Shapes here. I try, when there's a key command, yeah, it's not in this one. I try to, yeah, there you go. So there's a place where I'm typing it. I change the font for the thing I type in so that you can kind of recognize that it's different. It's more of a typewriter font. I'm just trying to tell you when I use a key command that I highlight it. Again, it doesn't matter because there are other options that are available to it as well. So that's the command line. And it kind of floats there. You want to kind of keep one eye on it as you're doing commands because a lot of times it'll prompt you for the next step. Or if you're kind of lost, what do I do now? Read what the command line says because a lot of times it'll tell you what to do. So it's something to be aware of that it's there. We have a variety of tools that are built in to Rhino that you can jump through. For example, I can click on this standard and it gives me a standard set of tools. As I go over here, there's a bunch of specialty tools. If I was dealing with solids, I could look at the solids tools. That then changes the tools that are available in the sidebar. For the most part, I leave it stuck on standard, and then we access the other commands as necessary. But the standard is generally just fine. As we move down, we talked about this sidebar having the most commonly used tools. Within certain tools, so for example, the rectangle tool, I'm picking on that as an example. You see that it has a little triangle next to the lower right corner. That means that there are other tools hidden underneath it. If you've worked in any of the Adobe products before, you're used to this strategy of condensing the toolbars. So for example, if I were to click on the rectangle tool, or click and hold on it, I'd get several more options. These are all related to rectangles. Rectangle corner to corner is the most obvious. I could do a rectangle with a center and a corner. I could do a rectangle with kind of a line and a third point, right? I could do a rectangle that's vertical, that's going up in space, right? I could do a rectangle with a rounded corner. So all those are available to me, or I can just use the standard rectangle, okay? So as with, like for example, if I went to circle, there's a bunch of different circles. If I went to the polyline tool, there's a bunch of different polylines. So there's always more below a particular tool if you need it, okay? These are also available. If I, for example, clicked rectangle corner to corner, I can change the type of rectangle by clicking on one of these in the command line to change which type of rectangle I'm drawing, for example. So I'm just trying to show you where all this stuff is presented. It'll be clear as we go forward. Okay? All right, so if we look at the main screen itself, this is something that's different than a lot of programs that you're used to. We have what are the typical orthographic projections. We have top, we have front, and we have right side. So if you took 130 or 131, you probably talked about some of this stuff. Engineering 119 would certainly talk about it. You have a top view, right, and it's always in the upper left corner. You have a front view that corresponds, and you have a right view that would be folding the object out to the side. In Rhino, we have a fourth view that's called a perspective view, which is basically looking at the object in 3D. Okay? And we have the ability to work in any one of these or all of them at the same time in Rhino. Sometimes people will want to just work in the perspective. For what we're doing today, chances are you'll work in just the perspective. We can enlarge the perspective view by double-clicking on the text here that says perspective. So if I double-click, it now takes up all four views. If I double-click, if I double-click on it again, we now see the four views back. Right? So I'm just jumping between views. On the right side here, next to where our view is, we have something called properties. Next to that, we have something called layers. Right? Next to that, we have something called display, and then we have help. Right? So don't be afraid of help. It does exist should you need it. Okay? The problem with a help file on a piece of software like this is there are so many things to look for. So sometimes it's relevant, sometimes not. Okay, so we're just going to leave it on properties. As we look down here at the bottom, right, does everybody see this? Sorry, my head's always in the way. It says end, near, point, mid. Anybody not see this? Yeah. At the bottom? Yeah, it's down there. Is it down there? Okay. Yeah. It should be on these computers. It should be at the bottom of all the computers. This is something that has to be configured when they update the computers, and every once in a while somebody's it doesn't show up. And so
I've only got one check on the.
That's okay. The checks don't matter. The point is, if you see it, that's all that matters. Okay. If it's not there, let me know, and we'll make it show up again. It should be there, but again, the computers are the computers, and sometimes they're not there. So we'll work on it. So right now, I'm going to leave on end checked, right? And the rest of these don't really matter for right now. I'm going to uncheck point. I'll leave mid checked, and I like perpendicular, so I have a checkbox there. The key one for what we're doing today is end. That's the one that's going to matter. All right? So this is kind of the overview. Oh, I missed this. If we go down one more, and I know this is behind my head, so you really can't see it on the projector, it will come across here, and it will give us things, including something called millimeters, which are the current units. We're going to change that in just a second. And then as we come across, we get what layer we're working on, and then we have a bunch of check buttons here for grid snap or ortho or object snap or smart tracking. Generally, the defaults are just fine in those lists. We don't, however, want millimeters to be our units. So I'm going to right-click where it says millimeters. I'm going to go to Unit Settings. And I'm going to change my model units from millimeters to be in inches. Generally speaking, in Rhino, you're always going to want to set your units to inches. Some people would prefer to work in feet, but it really messes with materials because most materials are designed to be in inches instead of feet, so your bump maps and stuff will be way off. So if you can get in the habit of working in inches, you're going to be better off. So we'll go ahead and use inches there, and I'll say OK. And you'll see, I don't have to scale the model, we'll say no. You'll see that it'll change from being millimeters to being inches. Okay? If you've already jumped ahead and you didn't change it, it's not the end of the world for what we're building today.
Model units have changed. Removing all cam plugs is bad.
That's fine. You've got a plug-in running on top of it. I'll have to figure out why that's running. All right. So I've got inches now, and I'm on the default layer. And so now I'm really ready to start modeling. And I'm going to refer to the Rhino 5.2 tutorial so that I do this in the correct order of steps. Okay. So first thing is we changed inches, and now we're going to start. We downloaded, this is saying as if you started from scratch. We downloaded the template, so we're good to go. So I'm going to start here at step 3. Right? We're in the perspective view, and I'm going to start at what's called the origin. And we're going to spend the next several days in class, starting on Wednesday, really understanding how Rhino sets up a coordinate system and how something exists in space. So for right now, you're just going to trust me that it's at a particular place. So I'm going to use the rectangle corner-to-corner tool. Okay, so let me jump back to Rhino. And I'm going to come over here into my tools, and I'm going to pick the rectangle corner-to-corner. And you see when I kind of mouse over it, it gives me a little yellow highlight, and it says rectangle corner-to-corner. and I'll go ahead and I'll click on that rectangle corner to corner. I could also go up to the curve menu and go to rectangle corner to corner, or I could type rectangle. So again, 3 different ways of accessing the command, and as you get faster at working, you'll find which one is fastest for you. For me, it's command line. I do almost everything by the command line, but when I'm teaching, obviously, I'm not going to do it because you'll all get lost. So I'm going to go ahead and just pick the rectangle corner to corner, which I did, and I'm going to look here at my command line, and it's going to say first corner of rectangle. So what it's asking for is where do I want the rectangle to start? And so in the little handout that we were looking at, I said I wanted it to start at a point called 0, 0, 0, okay, which is the origin. Now, we'll talk about what 0, 0, 0 means next class. It's a mathematical term for where it exists in space in 3 dimensions. But for right now, all we have to do is type in 0, 0, 0. Okay? So I've typed in that value. I could technically place it on the screen somewhere, but it's a little bit less accurate. So I'll go ahead and type 0, 0, 0, followed by the Enter key on the keyboard. Okay? Then I'll look here, and it'll ask me what's the other corner or the length. And so you can also see in space here, right, that I can draw it, right, or I can type in the value. So let's look back at this simple shapes, right. I want it to be 5 feet by 5 feet. Okay, so I have a couple options here, right. It says other corner or length. Easiest thing to do would be to type a 5 with an apostrophe, comma, and another 5 with an apostrophe. The apostrophe is representative of feet. The quotation mark is representative of inches. Yeah. So I've typed 5 feet, comma, 5 feet, and I'll go ahead and hit Enter. And it will then make a little tiny square for me. Okay? So this little rectangle, or this little square, is really pretty small. And if I were to click on it, right, you see that it highlights in yellow. Okay, that means it's selected. I want to zoom in on this object a little bit, so I'm just going to roll my mouse button, my middle mouse button, right, towards the screen, and it's going to zoom in the direction wherever my mouse is. So if I had my mouse over here and I were to zoom in, obviously I'm going to lose my object. If I put my mouse on top of the object and I scroll, I'm going to zoom in on the object. Right? Should be relatively intuitive for how that works. Okay? So we're going to move on. Now that I've done that, let me jump back. And again, I'm being very rigorous in following along so that you guys can see this. Okay? I'm going to use the rectangular plane corner to corner tool. That's my next. Wait, hold on. Oh, sorry. I jumped a step. Go back. All right, here we go. Sorry, step 4. I'm going to use the patch tool, which is available in the menu structure under Surface and then Patch. So we'll go back here. I'm going to go up to Surface and then select Patch. Now I could also type Patch, depending. Right? So Surface and then Patch. And it's going to say select curves, points, or point clouds and meshes to fit a surface through. Okay, which is essentially saying, what do you want to patch? And I want to patch this rectangle. So I'm going to select the rectangle, and I'll press Enter. And this will pop up a little Patch Surface Options dialog box. And I say in this little handout that the U spans and the V spans should be 2. And then I say OK. So U spans 2, V spans 2. Now, if you get a little bit lost as I go through this, I'm going to do this like 5 times today. Right? So it's under Surface and then Patch. The Surface menu. Okay. So I'll go ahead and say OK. And we'll see that I'll have something, what used to be just a rectangle is now a rectangle that has a cross in the middle of it. Okay, which is essentially meaning it's an actual surface. Okay? So the next piece is I'm going to do a rectangular plane corner to corner. Right? So I'll jump back here, and rectangular plane is hidden underneath this plane, this kind of bluish object with 4 dots on the corner. And so if I click and hold, I can pick rectangular plane corner to corner, which is right here. Okay? It's a rectangle with a dot in each corner. Okay? The problem is that if I were to draw this right now, right? And I'm going to don't follow this part of the step. But if I were to draw this right now, I'm again locked into the x and the y, the ground. Whatever I draw is on the ground. So I don't want that to be on the ground. Instead, so again, I'm going to pick rectangular plane, corner to corner. Yeah, I could get it from the surface menu, plane, corner to corner. But this time I want it to go vertically. I don't want it to be stuck in that ground plane. So I'm going to click here. It says first corner of plane, or see these things in parentheses? I have the ability to do 3-point, vertical, center, or deformable. I want vertical because I want it to go up. So I'm going to click on vertical, and it's going to say start of edge. So I'll pick this side on the back, and then I'll pick this side on the back. And when I do that, that's an edge. And now you see that it's going up. So instead of being flat in the ground, it's going vertical. Okay. And I'm going to type 5 feet, because that's the length of the side, or the height.
It says, oh, 5 feet.
Right? And after I type 5 feet and then enter, right, it's going to say choose rectangle, which basically means do I want it to go up or do I want it to go down? See how if I move my mouse it goes up or it goes down? Obviously I want it to go up. So I'll make one more click with the left mouse button and I'll have my plane. Okay? So again, like I said, I'm going to continue repeating. We're going to do this several more times as we go through. So I have the first one. So if I start to move forward, this is about the time when I start to lose people, right? So if I lose you, just hang tight. We'll come back and you'll start from this step and then we'll do it again, okay? But I want to keep going for those of you that have actually gotten to this step. We want to get through the whole thing. Okay, so I'll jump back to my instructions here, right? And it says repeat step 4 to create another adjacent side, okay? So actually it should say repeat step 5, right? Because we just did step 5. So let me go back to Rhino. I'm going to once again pick rectangle. Now notice I went to corner, but there's also an icon for vertical plane, which is essentially the same thing. It's just jumping me ahead to that. And so I've got start of edge will be here, end of edge will be there, and I'll pull this up into 3 dimensions. Okay? So we can start to see this now that it's 3D. But sometimes you want to orbit around an object. And this is something that really throws me off because I work in SketchUp and in Rhino. In Rhino, you can right-click to orbit. So if I right-click and hold, I can orbit around my object really easily. In SketchUp, you can't. And it drives me nuts when I'm teaching SketchUp because I constantly try to do that because it's habit to do it with a right-click. Right? So anyway, in Rhino, those of you that are used to the middle mouse button, you got to switch to the right-click. You get the idea. So I can orbit around and I can see what this object looks like kind of in 3 dimensions, which is obviously the intent. Okay? So the view I had wasn't particularly bad. I just like to point out that I can do that at this stage. Okay? So let me jump back here, right? And we're going to use a polyline to create a diagonal line across the top of the cube. And so there's the button for polyline. So if we come back here, it's this button right there for polyline. It would also be available under curve, polyline. Okay? And I'm going to create a diagonal line that goes from this point across to that point. Okay? When I'm done, I'll press enter on the keyboard. So I end up with that line that's highlighted in yellow. So here we are back. Right? I've done that, polyline to create the diagonal line. Okay? I'm going to use a surface from 3 or 4 corner points, right, to basically fill in the top of the cube. Right? So let me go back here, and I'm going to pick this tool, which is surface from 3 or 4 corner points. This is actually one of the very few tools that I just pick consistently. I don't actually type it in. And so it's going to say first corner of surface. I'll pick this corner. Second corner of surface, I'll pick that corner. Third corner of surface, I'll pick this corner. And it would do a 4th corner, but I don't need a 4th corner because I'm doing a triangle. So I'll just hit enter to be done. And it will then put a surface on top. So if I orbit around a little bit, we can see that it has a surface on top. All right, so we're kind of building this up. So I'll jump back again, and I'll move forward. I'm going to use a command called duplicate edge. or dupe edge if I were typing it in, or it's under curve, curve from objects, duplicate edge. Now this one, I have to admit, is a more advanced command. If you feel a little bit lost, you can, of course, pick the polyline and draw the line. Nothing wrong with it. When we get to complex shapes later on in the semester, though, it will be really nice to be able to duplicate an edge. You get used to that. So I try to introduce it now. So it's under curve, curve from objects, duplicate edge. And it's going to allow me to pick. It says select edges to duplicate. I'm going to pick that edge as the edge to duplicate. Let me make sure I do this in the correct edge. Hold on. To look at my example. Yeah, that'll work. All right, so I've duplicated that edge. I'll go ahead and hit enter, and it then makes a curve that is from that edge of the surface. And so this is one of the things that Rhino does very well. It's called derivative geometry. You create an object from another object. And that's one of, like, for example, if I had two objects that intersected in space, I can create a curve from the intersection of those two objects. And so if it's rectilinear, if it's a square and a square, it's not that big a deal. But if it's a surface that goes this way and a surface that goes this way, and you can get the intersection of those two and then work from that curve, it's a really powerful tool. So at this stage of the game, would it be easy to draw it? Sure. But down the road, you're going to want to be able to find that derivative geometry. And so we'll get into that as we get a little bit further along, about halfway through the semester. OK, so I have that. So we're going to jump back again and continue following along. Right? I'm going to select this newly created curve and the diagonal curve that I did in step 6. This is actually obviously my numbers are off. Right? It's step 7, so I'm one number off. Sorry. And I'm going to type loft or go to surface and then loft. Okay, so let me go back here. I'm going to select. I have this one selected. I need to select 2, which means I have to hold down the shift key. Right? Very much like you would do if you were selecting multiple files or something working on a computer. So you see that Rhino highlights them both in yellow for me. So they're both highlighted. And then I'm going to go to surface and then loft. I could type in loft, right? Or there's actually a command for loft that I never picked that's over here. So I'll go to surface and then loft. And the loft options are all just fine. We'll just say OK. And you can see that it built a really complex curving surface based on those 2 lines, whoops, right there, that gives me a really nice curve. Okay? So I now have that. And from here, I'm going to finish off this shape, right, with one more of the surface from 3 or 4 corner points, right, to fill off that last surface. So let me go ahead and jump back. Surface from 3 or 4 corner points right here. And we're going to pick 1, 2, and 3, and then hit enter. And I've now closed off that particular shape. Okay? So I can right-click and I can orbit around, and we can see that I made that little cube. Okay? Or the cube with the sloping side on it. Okay? So we'll talk about what to do with this shape in a second, but I'm going to go back and start again and do this whole thing over again, so that you guys can see me do it twice. If you've already feel like you got to this stage and life is good, then practice it again, because one extra cube isn't going to hurt you. And so you have a couple in practice. Yeah? If your cube is transparent, click on this little triangle next to where it says perspective, and you're going to switch from wireframe to shaded. And then you'll be able to see it.
And I have a small box. I don't know how it got so small, but somehow, I don't know.
Let me take a quick look.
I think I was like step 2 or 3.
Yeah, it's okay. Let's start back at this. Zoom in here. And we're going to start, well, you'll start with me this time.
Yeah.
Okay?
All right.
And double click where it says, see where it says perspective there? Double click that, which will make it big so you see just this. Okay, so we're going to start fresh. Do this again. Yeah. It's essentially doing the same thing. Next time when you do it again, practice with a loft. Like I said, there's a lot of ways of doing the same thing. It's normal. All right, so I'm going to do this again in practice. So I'm going to start with the rectangle corner-to-corner tool, which is available here. And this time I'm just going to start it somewhere not at the origin, somewhere out in space, because I already have one. So I'll click out here somewhere. And because I started it somewhere out in space, I'm going to type the @ sign, like the email address @ sign, which I'll explain what this does next class. And then I'll type 5 feet, comma 5 feet. Okay? And I'll go ahead and hit enter. And I get another rectangle. Okay? So this rectangle isn't actually a surface just yet. I have to make it a surface, and I'm going to do that by using the patch command, which is available under surface and then patch, or I could type patch, depending on your comfort level.
Even for a new draw, I mean, for even if I start at 0, right?
Right, it's the same thing. It doesn't matter.
So, go to surface and patch.
Right. All right, so I have surface and then patch, and it's going to tell me here at the command line, select the curves or a bunch of other stuff that I want to use as part of my patch. I only have a curve, which is right here, and I'll select it. It'll turn yellow, and when I'm done, press enter when done. I'll press enter on the keyboard, and it gives me the patch surface options dialog box. Okay, the defaults here are fine. It should be 2 and 2, and I'll go ahead and say OK. If you have 10 and 10, it's not the end of the world if you use it, but you can switch it to 2 and 2 if you want. Once you're done, you'll go ahead and say OK. And you should get a very nice square. All right, so I've got this nice square. The next thing that I need to do is I need to build the back side that's going to go over here. So I'm going to use a surface tool. And so I'll come over here to the surfaces, but it's not this one. It's not the 3 or 4 corner points. I'm going to click and hold and navigate to this one, which is rectangular plane corner to corner. Okay, it's like a rectangle with a cross in it and 2 dots. Okay, I'll pick that, and it'll ask me for the first corner of the plane, or do I want it to be a vertical plane? Well, because this is a 3-dimensional object, I want it to be vertical, so I'm going to click on vertical. I could also just type V and then enter for vertical. Okay, so once I have that, it's going to be the start of edge. So we'll pick this edge here, and we'll pick that edge, or that end right there. And now we can see that I'm drawing this right in 3 dimensions. I'm going up. Okay? So it says, what's the height? So I'll go ahead and put in 5 feet as my height. So 5 apostrophe, and then enter. And then it's going to ask me the rectangle that I want. Do I want it going down or do I want it going up? Obviously, I want it going up. So I'll click on the upper side to make the surface there. Okay? I'm going to use the exact same command to do it again, but you'll notice that I didn't have to actually pick V for vertical. There is a tool to do this straight from the tool.
So I don't know. I mean, I didn't get the paint. I mean, where do you stop that at? It goes 5. The height.
You say 5 feet, and then enter. Yep.
Okay.
And so now it's going, and it's going to ask you to scroll out a little bit. See, it's going to ask you whether you want it to be this way, or if you move the mouse down here, don't click. Just move the mouse down here. Right. See how it's going down?
Yeah.
Obviously, we want it on the upper side.
So
and then click with the left mouse.
All right.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay, so I have that. I'm going to do the same thing, right? Which is, again, I could go to the rectangle corner to corner, vertical, and do it. Or I can pick the button that represents the vertical plane. Doesn't matter which way you do it. Okay? And again, I'll pick the start of the edge and the end of the edge. I can type 5 feet and then enter. But I also, since I already have the height, I can just snap to the end, and I'll know it's the same height. And so I'll then end up with my 3D object, right, where I have the 2 back sides.
I got a perpendicular.
Let's take a look. Snap to there.
Oh.
And then pull up and snap to right there.
Okay.
Good. All right, so now I'm going to use the polyline tool, which is available right underneath the arrow. And I'm going to draw a line from this corner to that corner. And then I'll press enter when I'm done. Polyline is a continuous. You can keep going and drawing more. But obviously, I just need one straight segment. So I have that. Now I need to fill in this top with something. So I'll use the surface from 3 or 4 corner points, which is the first surface option here. And I'm going to click on the 3 corner points. Hold on one second. So I'll go 1, 2, 3. Now I could keep going for a 4, but I only want a triangle, so I'll hit Enter, and it'll end with just that. What's your question?
So the line you drew across first, you needed that before you could make a plane?
No, I don't. I could have jumped. I'm gonna need the line in the next step when I do the loft, but I could have done it. It doesn't matter the order.
So the loft wouldn't work.
I could. You need 2 lines to make the loft. I could have duplicated the edge of both of them. You know, if I were doing it, I wouldn't have drawn the line first. I would have duplicated the edge. And the better you are at it, there's an efficiency to how Rhino keeps certain things selected as you create them. So you can eliminate certain steps by not having to select things, because it'll keep something from the last command selected, or it'll add something to the previous selection set, and then you can go into the next command. So you can do stuff with skipping steps. But until you get to that level of comfort, it's better to do like one at a time.
So the fill mark is on which one do you have?
So you're going to use the surface from 3 or 4 corner points, which is actually the very first one. Yep. And you're going to click 1, 2, 3, and then press Enter. Okay, so I have that top. The next thing I need to do is I need to create a line along this surface. I could just go to the polyline tool and draw a line from here to here, which is perfectly fine. Or I could use the derivative geometry that I was talking about earlier by going to Curve, Curve from Objects, Duplicate an Edge. No, you will actually have to draw it again. Right? So that's one of the things that's important to distinguish in SketchUp. When you're working in SketchUp, a surface is defined by lines. Right? So in order for the surface to exist, you have to have a line that goes all the way around it. Right? Then the surface exists. Surfaces in Rhino are completely independent of curves. You don't need any curves to have a surface. But if you need the curve, you can then derive it from the surface. Yeah.
So the term curve in Rhino.
Curve, line, polyline are all the same thing in Rhino. So in Rhino, all we have are curves and surfaces. Technically speaking, we have solids, sort of, which is just Rhino saying, yeah, I'm pretending these are one solid object, but they're not. They're surfaces. So Rhino only works in the world of surface, line. Or curve is a more generic term because line assumes straight point A to point B. Curve can be anywhere in between point A to point B. So they're kind of all interchangeable in Rhino. And I will probably call it a line, a curve, a polyline, kind of interchangeably. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate that edge, which is going to be this edge right here. You see that it highlights in yellow as I do that. I'll press Enter on the keyboard, and it will then highlight in a lighter yellow. Okay, so that line is selected. I'm going to then hold down the Shift key on the keyboard, and I'm going to select the diagonal line that I previously drew across. So this brings up a good point while I'm doing this, is you see that when I clicked on that edge to select it, it brought up this little selection menu, and it said, wait a minute, there's 2 objects that are on top of each other. Which object did you mean? And this is one of the great things that Rhino does that AutoCAD doesn't do so well, in that it brings up this list, and I can scroll through, and it will highlight in kind of this pinkish color, did I mean the surface, or did I mean the curve? Right? And you can imagine if you have a really complex set of geometry where maybe there's 16 different things on top of each other, you can scroll through and say, oh yeah, I wanted that one, which is nice. So I wanted the curve, so I'll click the curve. And so now I have both the yellow line here selected and the yellow line here selected. And I can then go up to surface and loft. Loft is one of the best and easiest ways of creating a really good surface in Rhino. And we'll get used to lofts, and we'll use them a lot as we go forward. So for right now, I'll go ahead and click on loft. And it will then give me a few options. The defaults are fine. I'll say OK. And now I have that curving surface, which if we orbit around, you can see is that nice curving surface. I'll come have a look. Right click and hold. Come out. No. Sorry, I was answering that.
So,
Okay.
you know, I'm doing this, right? Edge.
Enter.
Enter. Oh.
So now you have those two. Now you can go to surface, loft. So there's an example of, see how you duplicated the two edges, pressed enter, and then you went straight to surface loft because you already had those two selected.
Right.
So there's an example of skipping steps.
So the enter, what does the enter do?
It ends the command. So you say duplicate edge, boom, boom, enter,
Okay.
it does the command. We'll get to that in just a second. Okay, continue. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do is a surface from 3 or 4 corner points to fill in this side. So I'll pick the surface from 3 or 4 corner points again, just as we did on the top. And I'll pick 1, 2, and 3 to make this side. I don't want a 4th, so I'll go ahead and hit enter, and I'll end up with my object there. Okay, so I did 3 points. 1, 2, 3, enter. Okay, so I know that some of you are probably still a little lost, which is perfectly okay. Don't bail on the class because you're lost today. Okay, stick with it. I promise you, you will get it. Okay, it's always a little hard the first day, but we've got to start somewhere. Okay, but I promise you, you'll get there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through some of the more advanced things that people like to do at this point. If you feel comfortable, you can do it. If you're still a little lost, just hang out, and then I'll come through and I'll make sure each of you individually gets the help you need and you get to where you want to go. Okay? But there's enough people who are starting to play with V-Ray that I couldn't not give you a little taste of V-Ray on the first day. Why not? Okay? So I have some objects, and I want to go ahead and I want to apply a material to these objects so that they look pretty when I render. If I were to render right now, it's a blue ball that's available in the toolbar here. If I were to render right now, I'd end up with kind of a white background and these red plastic squares. Okay? Now, maybe not. If you started using my template, you'll get this. If you didn't, you won't get this. Because I preloaded a few things and I already assigned some materials. But we're going to mess around with it a little bit. Okay? So I'm going to change the material on this cube to be something else for fun. So I'm going to go ahead and select this cube. Right? So I just drag a box around the whole cube. And then I'm going to go up to the menu that says V-Ray on it. And I'm going to go to something called Material Editor. And again, this isn't even written out as step-by-step, so this is purely for fun. Right? If you got to the point where you had the cubes, I'm happy. Okay, and we'll talk about how to get the cubes out after that. But for right now, I'm going to go to Material Editor. And I have some stuff that I've preloaded. So let's say that I didn't want red. I wanted to make a gold cube for fun. Okay? So I can pick on a material called gold, and you can see a preview of the material right there. It looks like gold. Okay? If I want that to be on my cube, I can right-click on gold and say Apply Material to Selection. It's right there. I can close this, and I can render it again, and lo and behold, I'll have a gold cube with nice little reflections and stuff like that. Okay, so I have a gold bar of a cube. If I didn't like the gold bar, I could again select my object, go up to V-Ray, go to Material Editor, and I could pick something else. We already did the plastic. Let's say I wanted a shiny blue. I could apply the material to the selection, and I could then render it, and I get a shiny blue.
Hey, I lost my block.
Right. So, if you don't get to here, I'm not particularly worried. Okay, but we can continue. You can play around with these. You can use any of the materials. If you get to the point where you have your object showing up, right, you might want to arrange the composition slightly, something like that. Render it. There's my objects. I'm going to go ahead and save these objects, which are available. There's a little save icon. All right, this is not saving the Rhino file. This is saving the rendering, only the rendering. And we'll save this on the, let's see, this is spring 2016. This is exercise 201, and I'm just going to save it on the desktop. I'll click Save. Okay, so I'll help you get these outputs. Once you have that, we're going to go ahead and post it to the course website. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to pause. I'm going to come around and I'm going to help you guys get to where you have a JPEG image. Okay, then we'll come back in probably 20 minutes or so, and I'll show you the actual posting process. Okay? Those of you that have already done Digital Tools 135, you can go ahead and post just like you would normally do. Just make sure you categorize it as exercise 201 and 136 because you're now in that class. Okay? So I'm going to come around and I'm going to walk through each of you individually, and then we'll come back and we'll do the posting all together.